This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Some interesting games on tap across the NFL in week number 10, including a showdown between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New England Patriots, where the Patriots finally facing a team that, outside of the Bills, is pretty good. And I think that game sets up for a pretty interesting betting breakdown as well. So a lot to break down for today. We're going to go through game by game across the entirety of NFL Week 10, breaking down my models, spread and total predictions for all those games, and laying out my favorite bets at FanDuel Sportsbook here on a Tuesday. Welcome on into Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, here to break down my thoughts on the entire NFL Week 10 slate, breaking down again, my spread and total predictions for every single game and letting you know where I'm seeing value at FanDuel Sportsbook for this week. We'll dive into all that here in just 1 second, but first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the Covering the Spread podcast feed and the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page. We are here Monday through Friday, breaking down both the NFL and college football, getting you set for all of those. Tomorrow, Ed Feng will join me breaking down his thoughts on college football week 11, NFL Thursday, and of course, NFL player props on Friday. All right here. It's the exact same feed. So check out the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page. Leave us a thumbs up there. Turn on notifications, and also check out the Covering the Spread podcast feed and leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. The race to the NFL playoffs is on, and you're betting on FanDuel this season. And if you're betting on FanDuel this season, here are some things to keep in mind. Number one, celebrate your wins responsibly. When your bet hits, it's important to never leave a high five hanging. That's just good sportsmanship. Number two, no kickoff, no problem. Live betting means you're free to jump into the game anytime. And number three, if you're a new customer, bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. And now you're ready to play your game on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, an affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC, Kentucky, or Wyoming. First online or gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Visit RG-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/Chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit Gambling Helpline ma.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. First online real money wager, only $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Let's begin things now by taking a look at the Thursday night football game for this week. That is the Raiders at the Broncos. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, the Broncos favored by 9.5, and the total in this game sitting at 41.5. As things stand right now, I've got the spread Broncos minus 7.8. But that could change based on the trade deadline here for the Raiders. Obviously, Jacoby Myers is not the most impactful player, but losing him would probably downgrade the Raiders at least a bit. So don't want to act on the Raiders' money line, where I'm showing value at 4-1 right now. But I do want to keep tabs because potentially could see some interest there. I do, though, like the over in this game. It is just 41.5 right now, sitting at over at minus 114. I've got this at 44.6 for a couple of reasons. The first one being, I think the Broncos will be pretty effective in this match with the Raiders. Coming off that Texans game, you don't expect a whole lot from their offense in that one on the road against an elite Texans defense. Raiders are a different story, where this defense is not one that I fear all that much. And the Broncos defense is banged up. Obviously, probably no Patrick Surtain in this game, but also now Riley Moss is banged up too. So they could be down their top two very good cornerbacks. And Geno Smith may not be perfect by any means for the Raiders, but he can generate overs via either moving the ball himself or their own picks and leading to short fields for the opposing team. So I got this total at 44.6. I do agree with the model. 41.5 feels a bit on the low side, even with the potential for this Raiders offense to get downgraded with the uncertainty around Myers, with the trade deadline being for today. So even with that being up in the air, I do want to take the over 41.5, minus 114 as my first bet of this week. Again, we'll keep tabs on What the Raiders offense looks like, maybe I decide to dive in. 9.5 is a lot of points for a Broncos team that is pretty flawed, at least offensively, I think. So I could see myself diving in there, maybe taking the money line at 4-1 to take advantage of the volatility, but do think the over is the right play for this one. Next game up is the Falcons at the Colts. This game is, of course, over in Berlin. So no home field advantage for this one. As things stand here at FanDuel Sportsbook, the Colts are favored by 5.5, and the total in this game is sitting at 48.5. I think that this market is pretty proper because I've got the Colts favored by 5.3 in my model and the total of 49.9. Now, given the Colts were 3-point favorites against the Steelers on the road last week, maybe it feels weird that the Colts are just favored by 5.5 here with this being a neutral site. However, I think that's right. There is still a bit of a prior in my model, and that prior was not super high on the Colts. They did get downgraded this past week too, because Daniel Jones did some stuff that we've seen from Daniel Jones before against a very good pass rush. And what do the Falcons do well? They rush the passer. So I think 5.5 is correct. I'm not betting the Falcons. I think that they are also a very flawed team. I'm not taking the over here. 48.5 over is -110. I think it's just to say this is not, in my eyes, at least an overreaction to the Colts struggling last week. They're a team that is good, and they are legitimately good and improving that, but there's still that little sprinkle of doubt in there to keep this spread at 5.5 versus being a bit larger for this one. So to me, 5.3, total 49.9. I think the market has this one pretty well pegged. Next game up is the Texans and the Jaguars. This game is in Houston right now, FanDuel Sportsbook. The Texans slight favorites, money line for them -118, and the total is at 38.5. A bit surprising that the Texans are favored in this game, honestly, given that they very likely will not have CJ Stroud. When I run my model, I've still got the Texans by 1 in this game. That is even with, again, I'm assuming that Davis Mills will play in this game. That shows you how low my model is on the Jaguars. And frankly, the market is just as low on them as things stand. The spot where I do see value in this game is in the over. And I know that sounds very stupid, given that it's likely Davis Mills taking on Trevor Lawrence, potentially without his top 2 receivers, and Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter. So that could be a very dumb decision. However, this total is just very low. And when I put in Davis Mills for CJ Stroud and take away Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr., I got this total of 40.8. So it's not a massive gap between where I've got it and where the market has it. However, it's not a 0% chance that CJ Stroud plays in this game. I think it's close to 0 personally, just because if he did so, show some signs of a concussion. D'Amico Ryan said he's feeling better Monday, but that doesn't mean he's feeling asymptomatic, which means it doesn't guarantee he practices on Wednesday. I just don't think this total will get any lower if Stroud is officially ruled out. And if he winds up playing, there's a potential for this number to increase. The Jags defense is very flawed, let up a lot of points to the Raiders this past week. They have had good moments and they've gotten turnovers, but those are not always guaranteed. And Davis Mills was fine, I thought, against the Broncos. He's been okay enough in relief duty. And this Texans pass catcher core is getting better with Christian Kirk and Nico Collins now healthy. So even though I'm not way above market in this game, there are circumstances leading me to think that 38.5 could still be too low. So I will take the over in this one again at -105, just because I've got value on it as things stand, and there's potential for me to be even higher on it later in the week. So I will take over 38.5, -105 for the Jaguars and the Texans. Again, no read from me on the spread. I've got this about proper with the Texans -1, so not going to dive into that one personally. Got the Giants taking on the Chicago Bears in Chicago for this weekend. Should be a pretty fun game. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, the Bears favored by 3.5, and the total in this game is 48.5. I got that spread pretty efficient at 3.8. The Bears have been efficient so far this year. They've been decent. They haven't been maybe as good as perception, I wouldn't think. And the Giants look pretty good under Jackson Dart. With that said, though, I've got the Bears by 3.8. So I'm pretty in line with market here. I do think that 3.5 is the right place to have that one. I have this total at 45.6, which would lead you to think I want to take the under here at 48.5, even though it is -115. The reason I am not leaping to do so right now is the main reason I show value in the under is because as of now, there is a lot of projected wind in Chicago. 17 miles per hour is the forecasted wind speed in Chicago. So when I put that in my model, I have this total of 45.6. However, if I were to decrease that wind speed even to 10 miles per hour, where it's still elevated, but not as high as it is right now, then this total for me would go up to 46.8. And that's not a big enough value when I've got some concerns around a Chicago defense that just lost another key piece here. I could wind up downgrading the Giants defense too, if depending on secondary injuries throughout this week. They've had some guys sitting out the past couple of weeks. So I do show value in the under as things stand, but it's not value I want to take as of now, with the potential for that wind speed to change before we get to Sunday. If we get to Sunday and the wind speeds are still 17 miles per hour, then I'll happily take the under. But I want some assurances it'll stay there, because that is the key driver for why I'm showing value in this under. So I want to make sure that does stick. So no worry for me on the Giants and Bears as things stand, but keeping close tabs on the wind speeds to see if we need to jump on this under later on. Got the Ravens go on the road, take on the Minnesota Vikings. Right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, the Ravens are favored by 4.5, with this game being in Minneapolis. And the total in this game is at 47.5. 4.5 is a big number on the road for the Ravens, given that the offense has been okay so far this year. It's been decent. However, I've got this by Ravens by 4.1. With the Vikings, I have been looking long and hard at trying to potentially upgrade their offense, because they do have their two stud tackles healthy. JJ McCarthy played well at times on Sunday. So I gave long consideration to upgrading Minnesota in this game. And I did wind up doing so, because if you think about the Vikings, the reason that they set up pretty well entering the year was because the infrastructure around the quarterback. That infrastructure is not in place in week 2 when McCarthy looked terrible against the Falcons. He had no Darisaw in that game, no Jordan Addison, but both those guys are healthy. And we saw the offensive line play pretty well in that game against Detroit. They had some leaks, and they could have gotten wrecked at times by Alex Anzalone. Aiden Hutchinson, I thought, looked pretty good in that one too. They could have let up a lot of issues, but they didn't let that happen. So I did give the Vikings a slight upgrade, and I still have this as the Ravens by 4.1. With the upgrade to the Vikings, though, I do want to take the over at 47.5, sitting at minus 115. This Vikings defense is one that is very good, but is also not unbeatable, I don't think, by any means. Getting Andrew Van Ginkel back this past week did help them quite a bit. But when you're facing a healthy-ish, it seems like, Lamar Jackson and a healthy receiver core for this Ravens offense too, that sets up pretty well for the Ravens to be efficient on their side of things. As for the Vikings, again, they held up on the road against Detroit. Detroit's defense, although banged up, has still passed a lot of key tests this year. Now they're back at home, and they've had an additional week to reintegrate McCarthy into this offense. Sounds like Aaron Jones probably should be okay to play for this game too, and he looked pretty dynamic when he got his carries out there. So I think this Vikings offense move the football. I think the Ravens do the same. So I've got this total at 50.3 with where things stand. The Ravens getting to play indoors does help too. So when I see that number 47.5 over at minus 115, I think that's enough for me to dive in. So I will take the over 47.5 minus 115 for the Ravens and the Vikings, given how good the Vikings offense looked this past week. And given the fact that this Ravens offense has extra rest to get Lamar Jackson up to full speed, I think that's enough to push this game over a decently high total as things stand. We do not get a decently high total in the next game. That is because that is the Cleveland Browns taking on the New York Jets. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, this total is at 36.5, and the Jets are favored by 1.5. I think the total's right. I've shown value in a lot of overs so far this year. This is very much not one of them. I have this total at 37.1. So we're not taking the over. I do, though, think the Jets are the proper side in this game. And may feel odd to just kind of like look at this game and want to bet it based on the fact that we can just ignore any game we want on the NFL schedule. But I do think that it's a bad matchup for this Browns offense. They have really struggled to move the ball through the air so far this year. They have been at their best when they've been able to lean on Quinshon Judkins and let him cook. Now, Judkins should be good to go for this game. He practiced on Monday, so no health concerns there. My concern revolves around this Jets defense. They have been very flawed so far this year, but the one thing they have managed to do pretty well is stop the opposing ground game. So if that's the one thing the Browns offense can do well, and it's the one thing the Jets defense can stop, that's a stylistic matchup concern for me. And it's also a situation where the Browns defense has struggled when they've gone on the road. Garrett Wilson sounds like he may be back for this game for the Jets. Aaron Glenn said he should practice on Monday or should practice sometime this week. So if they get Garrett Wilson back, this passing offense has been better than the Browns, even though it's been pretty pathetic itself as well. I think that's enough to make the Jets values at -1.5. I've got the favorite by 3.4 in this game. So to me, laying 1.5 at -112 is a mighty fine way to bet this game. You can't ignore it. I would not blame you by any means because it is a very gross game. But I do think there is value in the Jets based on the bad matchup for this Browns offense going up against the Jets defense that can nullify the one thing they've done pretty well so far this year. So again, in this game, not looking at the over, but I do want the Jets -1.5 at -112. Next up, we got the New Orleans Saints taking on the Carolina Panthers. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, the Panthers favored by 5.5. Total in this game sits at 39.5. I did put in a downgrade for the Saints based on some offensive line injuries. They've got some guys who are banged up there, probably not going to go this week. The defense also could lose some players via the trade deadline and stuff like that. The offense could lose more players. I've got the spread as things stand as the Panthers -4. I'm not going to act on that. It is going to show value on the Saints side of things, but I want to see if they move Rashid Shaheed or Chris Olave at the deadline today. I'm going to wind up downgrading the Saints offense quite a bit. So this is one where I want to stand pat and kind of see what happens throughout the day for today, because I think there's a very high chance that the Saints wind up getting downgraded. Both maybe the offensive line winds up being worse than I thought it was, but then also because of the potential for them to move some guys. And frankly, this Panthers team has played very, very well. So we got to give them respect at some point. I'm going to do so right here. So right now, I have a Panthers -4 with the total of 41, but I want to see how things play out later on this week because there is a very good chance the Panthers, or the Saints, I should say, wind up getting downgraded even more. Got the Bills going on the road, take on the Miami Dolphins. Speaking of teams that could be moving things at the deadline today, Dolphins already made one trade yesterday. Jalen Phillips going to Philadelphia. I think there could be more in the menu, potentially with Minkah Fitzpatrick. So right now the market has the Bills -9.5, total at 49.5. I think the spread is very accurate. I had the Bills by 9.8, and the total in this game, 51.3. I don't think the Dolphins will make any moves offensively. I don't think we're going to see a guy like Jalen Waddle go. And frankly, he and Devon Achane are kind of the only guys who are needle movers in this offense right now. They're probably staying put. So I think we'll see some offense here. Maybe the Bills get a pass catcher. Not sure if they'd be active for this week if they were to do so, but we'll see how things play out there. I think the market's got this one pretty well pegged. Again, Bills by 9.8 for me, total 51.3. So happy to stay away and reevaluate after the trade deadline passes. I think the most fun game of the week is the next one. That is the New England Patriots taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, Bucs favored by 2.5, and the total in this game is at 48.5. I want to see how things play out throughout this week for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because there is a very good chance that I wind up upgrading their offense throughout this week. I did give them a slight bump already because Luke Goedeke seems like he'll be back, the right tackle. They activated him or opened his 21-day practice window on Monday. So Goedeke should be back, which will give them Tristan Wirfs and Luke Goedeke. Pretty good infrastructure there. And if they get Chris Godwin and Bucky Irving back, I'll give them an additional bump. So I do think the Buccaneers are pretty interesting here because we could see them at almost full health. However, even with the slight bump up, I've got them only favored by 1.2 points in this game, in large part because I respect this Patriots offense quite a bit. They have passed a lot of tests. Now, this is a very different matchup for them. And we did see Drake May struggle at times, both early in the Cleveland game and then in the Falcons game as well. And this is another spot where he could struggle. As a result of that, I do think there is value in the under 48.5 at -118 because there are a couple of routes to potentially this bet cashing. First one is the Patriots struggle finally facing a good defense. That's number one. Route number two is maybe the Bucs don't wind up being as healthy as I think they could be with the Godwin and Irving situations looming. Even if I were to upgrade them a bit, I think I would still show value in this under. I've got a 44.8 as things stand because it is a very tight spread, which means it's harder to project both teams to score a bunch of points. Longer drives lead to lower scoring games and stuff like that if they're more evenly matched. So as things stand, I've got this total of 44.8. I do think this total for me will rise throughout the week if we get good news on Godwin and on Irving, but I don't think it'll get above like 46.5 or so. And even then, I'd be willing to bet the under. So I do think there is value in under 48.5 at minus 118, even while I acknowledge the Buccaneers offense likely will get upgraded throughout this week. The Patriots, they're a good team. They've been a lot of fun. The defense, I think, is still pretty flawed. And the Buccaneers can be much better than what they've shown so far this year. But I do still want to ride at the under despite those factors because this Bucs defense is pretty good and there is potential for this game to not be as healthy as I was hoping it'd be. And also Kayshon Boutte for the Patriots, like potentially being out, does impact things as well because he's kind of the one deep threat they've got in their offense. So right now, taking the under, but not one of my higher conviction plays for this week. Next game up, got a lot more interesting last night. That is the Arizona Cardinals taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, the Seahawks favored by 6.5, and the total of this game is 44.5. I've got the spread at Seahawks minus 6.4, so I think the market is pretty well pegged here. I've caught up to the Seahawks. I think that the model is properly evaluating both their offense and their defense right now because they looked really good on both sides of the football. So happy with the model not showing value there. However, I do want to take the over in this game. I've got this total of 47.7. Over 44.5 right now is at minus 114 or minus 115. When you look at the Cardinals offense, they've been very efficient with Jacoby Brissett. And I was wrong last night. I thought the Cowboys would play well against this Cardinals team saying, hey, people are overreacting to Brissett and stuff like that. But it's now a 3-game sample and against 3 very different defenses. I don't like the Colts defense or the Cowboys defense, but I do like the Packers. And Brissett was pretty efficient in that game. That could be because maybe Brissett has unlocked this offense. But it also could be because they figured out ways to integrate Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride, things that would translate over should Kyler Murray start for this game. So whether it's Brissett or Murray, I kind of don't care. I feel like over 44.5 is going to wind up being a good look for this game. Again, I've got this one at 47.7. We get to take advantage of Jackson Smith-Njigba doing all the crazy stuff he has done. The Seahawks looked amazing, even with no Cooper Kupp, no Jake Bobo this past week. Cluster injuries at receiver don't matter because Torrey Horton's pretty good too. I think there's enough to like this over quite a bit. Now, it is a repeat divisional matchup. We do see offensive efficiency decrease in those setups, but to me, still happy enough to ride at the over here, 44.5 minus 115, because the Cardinals offense is playing pretty well. Still not super high in this defense, and the Seahawks offense just looks awesome with Jackson Smith-Njigba and Torrey Horton. That's enough for me to ride with the over in this game out in Seattle. Again, as far as the spread goes, Seattle by 6.4 for me on that one. Next game up is the Los Angeles Rams taking on the San Francisco 49ers. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, the Rams favored by 3.5, and the total in this game is 49.5. This was at 4.5, I believe, earlier on this morning. So looks like some movement towards the Niners here. The past couple of weeks, I had been projecting Brock Purdy is in for the Niners, only to downgrade them later in the week. Not going to bother projecting him for this week because I don't know when he'll be back out there. And we'll wind up seeing later on this week. When I leave the Niners at their baseline, I do not change any projections at all. Just kind of let this thing ride. I've got the Rams by 4.2. That is because the Rams, in one of my models, looking at just 2025 data, are the number 1 team in football. Now, they're not my number 1 power rank team because there are adjustments for teams like the Ravens, like the Chiefs, and stuff like that. And we still do include a prior, at least to a small extent at this point in the year. So they're not my number 1 team, but they are very freaking good with Puka Nacua looking healthy. They did a scan on him on Monday. Sounds like he'll be good to go, but not 100% there. So got the Rams by 4.2. Could wind up upgrading the Niners later in the week, depending on what we hear on Brock Purdy, but I don't want to do so before we hear news on that one. So happy to sit this one out and see where things go, but it should be a pretty fun game, even if it does wind up being Mac Jones on Sunday. Got the Lions going on the road, take on the Washington Commanders. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, the Lions favored by 8.5. Total in this game is at 49.5. Of course, no Jaden Daniels for this game. It sounds like no Terry McLaurin as well. I've already downgraded the Commanders for no Daniels. Might need to downgrade more for no McLaurin as well, because it's a pretty tough setup for them. No Luke McCaffrey. It's basically just Deebo Samuel. And frankly, the Commanders may wind up offloading more guys at the trade deadline today. They should. They're a very old team. They're not doing a whole lot this year. So trade away some assets, see what happens. I got the Lions by 7.6 as things stand, but I do think I will need to downgrade the Commanders a bit for the McLaurin absence, maybe downgrade should they make some trades today too. So a bit of value in the Commanders, but definitely don't want to take it until we see what happens at the trade deadline. As the total, I have it at 50.8. Market has it 49.5. So no read for me there. It's a stay away until we get further information on the Lions and Commanders. I would have loved this game, rematch of the playoffs last year if everyone are fully healthy, but that is not the case. And that makes me very sad. Next game up is the Sunday night football game. It is the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. These Chargers favored by 3 in this game. Total in this game is 45.5. I have the market being correct here. Got the Chargers by 3.1. That is even with a pretty big downgrade for no Joe Alt. Sounds like Joe Alt going to miss the rest of the season. That is a big bummer. They were already down Rashawn Slater. Now they're facing a Steelers pass rush that seems to be finally coming into its own. They hadn't been super impressive before this past week, but they faced a good Colts offensive line, got to Daniel Jones quite a bit, generated pressure, generated chaos, which is what they can do when they're at their best. So I thought they looked a lot better. And so I got the Chargers by 3.1 here. No read for me there. I have the total of 47.3, so a slight lean towards the over 45.5 at minus 105, but it's possible I'm not downgrading enough for the Joe Alt injury. So I'm okay standing pat in this one, ignoring it and watching the Sunday night because I'm pretty in line with the market of the spread and not high enough on the over to wind up pulling the trigger there. Final game of the week is the Monday night football game. That is the Eagles at the Packers. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook. Packers here by 2.5. Total in this game, 44.5. Eagles coming off their bye, so they do get a bump there. But even still, I've got the Packers by 3.9 in this game. So showing value in their money line, showing value in laying the 2.5 at minus 110. I don't know how I feel about that, though, because the Eagles team is so hard to diagnose, and frankly, so are the Packers. So I don't really want to dive towards the spread in this game. If I were to do so, it would be laying the 2.5 with the Packers, but conviction there is not very high. What I do want to bet here, though, is the over 44.5. Sounds like A.J. Brown will be back for this game. Devontae Smith is good to go. This Eagles offense has been a lot more pass heavy recently. And I think they will be again here against Green Bay because Green Bay has been a tiny bit more vulnerable against the pass than they have been against the rush. So if we get that Eagles offense that's willing to let it rip a bit, that could be pretty fun. And the Packers, despite their struggles against Carolina, I do still think are one of the best offenses in all of football. So as a result, I am way off market on this total. I've got it at 51.4. That's a big disagreement. And last week, every spot where I was way off market, I wound up being wrong. And I want to acknowledge that is very possible that could happen again, including on this Packers game against the Panthers. But it's 2 efficient offenses, 2 defenses that are good, but not amazing. And the wind doesn't seem to be a massive factor for this game. When you give me offenses this efficient, I'm not going to have a total as low as 44.5. So to me, taking the over at that number, sitting at minus 108 is going to be the way I want to play things for this Monday Night Football game. Maybe I feel better about the Packers spread when we talk on Monday for the Monday Night Football breakdown, but I do like the over enough and feel like we'll be able to ride at that one. Make that a building block for our show on Monday. So again, to recap the bets that I like for this week as things stand, taking over 44.5 for the Eagles and the Packers, rocking with the under or the over 44.5 for the Cardinals and the Seahawks, going under 48.5 for the Patriots and the Buccaneers, taking the Jets minus 1.5 against the Browns. What could go wrong there? Over 45.5 or 47.5 for the Ravens and the Vikings, taking over 38.5 for the Jaguars and the Texans, and finally over 41.5 for the Raiders and the Broncos on Thursday Night Football. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. Should be a pretty fun week. Again, back in tomorrow with Dr. Ed Feng, breaking down his thoughts on college football week 11. And then NFL Thursday, NFL player props on Friday, all right here on the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page and the Covering the Spread podcast feed. If you got any questions for me, I am on X and Blue Sky at JimSannes. You can find me on Threads at Jim.Sannes and check out FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your bets across NFL Week 10. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. Talk some college football. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.